And today on a bench we have a SBE, or Sideband Engineers. This is the Console II, and it's currently running off of a Siltronix VFO 90. So this was sent in really nice condition. I've done a couple of these for this customer. This one is not the later Console II version. Those actually have the model number written above them, above the meter right here. And there actually, it says, trying to think, what is it? SBE, trying to think what model number this is. 16 CB, and it would have a /T. So this is the earlier version. Like I say, radio's in really nice condition. Actually, I hear somebody. So there's somebody, because I'm actually in HF, that's somebody on 27 dots, about 6, almost 660, somewhere around there, upper sideband. So yeah, just a little bit of international skip coming in. Now I've done videos on these before, so I'm not going to go into great detail on these, but this one is a little bit different than, I think this one is different than the other ones that I've done. This one does have the, you've seen those, this one has the SN board in it, and this one also has the Vox switch on the back of it. Can't remember right off the top of my head if the other ones had that, but you can see the inside, yeah, just beautiful condition. So other than setting this up to run off of the VFO, customer just wanted the electrolytic capacitors replaced and the transceiver alignment done. And I always tell people, you know, if you feel confident doing something like recapping your radio, have at it. It's a great way to save money. This ain't one of them. Unless you have you know, proper desoldering equipment and you actually have a little bit of experience, I really don't recommend doing these. Let me just turn the variable power supply off here, and I'll show you why. I think I've covered this in other ones. It is a pain in the hoo-ha. A lot of capacitors are underneath all of this wiring harness here, which is not so bad from this side. Of course, you can just reach through with a pair of needle nose pliers when you desolder it to pull the part out. The problem is yes, the board is upside down. Most base station radios, when you're looking at the radio right side up, normally you'd see components. In these, you see the bottom, what would normally be the bottom side, or the solder side of your circuit board. But yeah, so a big problem with these are a huge majority of those capacitors you got to get to are underneath all of this wiring harness. They're down under here. You have to remove the transformer. You have to remove the SWR bridge board. There's caps underneath all of this stuff. It's just, and what makes these an absolute, it wouldn't be so bad if it was just that, but what really makes them bad is they're cinched or clinched lead. So when they installed the components in these boards, normally, if you're familiar with wave soldered boards, they just stuff what they call stuff the board. So the board faces straight up, they shove all the components in all the holes, it goes through a wave soldering machine. And then the component leads get trimmed off, usually with a sander. That's why a lot of times you'll see little burrs on components. They did not do that with these. They pushed the component through the board, trimmed the lead, and bent it over, tight up against the board. So every single fact, you know, there's a good example. That's why the leads kind of look flattened out. That's because they are flat. They're bent over. Well, trying to get those unsoldered is a lot harder than trying to desolder a normal component when it's installed in the board. The lead's just sticking straight out. So, you know, you can come in with your desoldering iron and just stick it straight down onto the component lead, melt the solder, and suck the solder off. These, you kind of got to get in on an angle here and kind of wiggle your way under, and you really do stand a chance of damaging the circuit traces on a board like this. It's earlier boards. It's not really the manufacturer's fault. This is just what they had back in the early days. So yeah, this is just one of those radios I don't recommend doing unless you've got a few cap jobs under your belt at the very least. So this one has a there's a BNC jack on the back that I installed, and a coax cable that runs up. The 11.950 megahertz crystal was removed out of the radio, so that's where the coax cable runs up to. It's soldered to where the crystal is would be normally in the socket on the other side, and then that crystal, when it was removed, was installed over there in the VFO in the crystal 1 position. This one already had the clarifier unlocked on it, so that's actually what this little yellow wire is right here. You can see somebody did put heat shrink tubing over it, so whoever did that way back when did it right. It is old heat shrink tubing. I just see that the style, but so they did do a good job there. But yeah, really nice and clean on the inside. Other than the cap job, the alignment, and installing that BNC connector, there really wasn't a lot else to do to it, because it's in such nice condition. The back side, yeah, just as nice as they get. You can see, really, there's nothing wrong. There's no little specks of rust, no imperfections whatsoever. There's the BNC connector that I installed. Now, I used to just use the original. On the back of these VFO 90s, they have an RCA jack, actually. Here is the old one. It was removed out of it. They have an RCA jack, and yeah, then you know, people end up just buying an audio cable to try and run, you know, the VFO signal into the radio, and yeah, that's audio cable is not a very good coax cable. So I started installing BNC jacks. I take the RCA jacks out of the back of the VFO 90s, install good silver-plated, high-quality. Actually, those things are, if I remember right, I think those things are ungodly expensive, something like $25 or $30 a piece. They're mil-spec. Really, what are they, like quad silver-plated or something? I got a bargain on a case of those one time at a surplus dealer. But yeah, anyhow, I stick one of those in the backs. The main reason I do that is, then when I ship this back to the customer, I can supply them with a real 50 ohm BNC cable, a real, you know, the type you see me using here at the bench when I'm, you know, doing testing stuff, you know, like even my communications test set. That's what this is, you know, just normal BNC cables. But I can use a better quality cable that's really designed for RF frequencies. That's the problem with the audio cables. Somebody will stick an audio cable from the VFO over to the radio here, and shoot, you could have 10 volts peak to peak coming out of this box, and by the time it gets to the back of this radio, it's been attenuated down to like 3 volts. You'll have that much loss in the cables. I've seen that happen before. So yeah, you can use a real coax cable. Same thing here. A good, you know, this is a double-plated, really high-quality silver-plated Teflon cable. Again, same thing. I also, because this is the driver and final area of the radio, during transmit, there is a lot of RF energy in this area, and of course I don't want any of those signals mixing back in, you know, coming into this and then leaching back into the signal and being mixed in again, because you could just end up with all kinds of weird harmonics. So I've put a thin wall piece of heat shrink tubing over the connection. Then I wrap that in EMI shielding tape, a cloth EMI shielding tape, and then put another piece of heat shrink tubing over top of that to make sure that that never comes off and can't short against anything. But yeah, that helps any of the RF energy, because, you know, like I say, you got the driver and the final transistors right there and there. It just prevents RF energy from getting mixed back in. Just good practice when you're doing that, especially when they're that close to each other. You want to try and cut down on all of that you can. But that's pretty much it for that. The VFO, yeah, honestly really wasn't a whole heck of a lot to do even to this. I still need to just really quick clean the top cover up on it. You know, I replaced, actually it's not screwed on, you know, replaced the 2 electrolytic capacitors in this. I did install one of my little homemade buffer amplifier boards in the underside, because on a lot of radios, this being one of them, if you try hooking one of these things up to a SBE Console II, these things have oscillators. They run at over 5 volts peak to peak output. I think they're actually like around 6 or 7 volts peak to peak is the output of the crystals on these things. They're just some booming, I mean, strong signals. Almost as strong as the signals you'd see in an old tube type crystal synthesized radio. And these really just don't have enough oomph to drive these radios properly. So yeah, I make up a little. It's just two 2N quad 2A transistors. And like I say, that bumps the signal up, and then more than enough to drive these. You know, clean this up, clean the control up, so you can see that's nice and free now. You know, makes for real easy tuning. Shoot, I mean, you use your pinky finger. Even the course you can adjust with just your pinky. You know. And people have asked me, how do you get these things so free, Mike? You know, I've got one, and I tried cleaning it, and it just doesn't. You know, it just doesn't spin as nice as I see the ones you do in your videos. It's not hard. It's really, really simple. There's 2 set screws. There's a hole right there in the top of the knob. If you can see that. Oh, great. Now it's in a shadow. There we go. Slide the cover back. So there's 2 holes in this knob. There's one right there, and yeah, one right there. So, you know. So yeah, there's one space in the middle, but. Regular head screw, just stick your screwdriver down in there, just slightly loosen up each of those set screws, you can get this knob off. There are then 2 screws that hold this aluminum piece on. They go straight back in. Take those 2 screws off. You're going to see where this shaft goes into this shaft. Just put a few drops of light oil. You don't need anything. Now, you don't want to use, I guess I should say stuff like WD-40. That stuff's actually too thin, and actually these a lot of times will skip. You'll be turning this, you know, especially if you try and turn this coarse knob and nothing, or you try and turn this knob and the dial doesn't move, and then oh yeah, then it moves and then it stops, and then it moves and then it stops. It's skipping because it just can't get any friction. It actually does need some friction to work because there's actually 2 ball bearing drive reductions in here. That's how this works. Has one on the outside here, and then there's another one on the inside. But like I say, where this center solid shaft goes in, just put a few drops of light oil. You know, like the old 3-in-1 household oils would actually work just fine. Just like 1 drop on that section. Then where you see the ball bearings, you'll actually be able to see back in and see the 4 big ball bearings of that that ball bearing reduction drive system. So all that is it has the outside, the inside shaft here, and there's a ball bearing separating this shaft from this outer part. And when you turn this, it takes a lot of turning, because when you're turning this, that's rotating those balls, and it turns this outside part really, really slow. And then there's another one on the inside, so you know, a double reduction. But again, just a few drops of light oil. When they came from the factory, they had grease installed in them. The grease has started to dry out. If you just add a few drops of oil, what can I say? It makes it juicy again. It softens up the grease. I have actually cleaned these out completely. You know, completely dismantled these things, taken all the gear reduction drive systems out, cleaned them into parts. You know, take them out to the garage into my big 55-gallon drum parts washer, and washed the darn things. Tried lubing them back up, and honestly, they work better by just adding oil. They actually operate a lot smoother. Because a lot of times these things are old, man. These things have been spun Lord knows how many tens or possibly hundreds of thousands of times. Somebody sitting there is just, you know, like I do. I mean, when I use these myself, especially if you're on sideband, you know, I'm sitting there just rocking back and forth, let's say, between 3 channels like this. And, you know, that's a lot of use over the years, somebody doing that. So, you know, these things get wear in them. So if you go removing all the gunk, I mean, usually getting rid of the gunk is a good thing. But when you get rid of all of the brass dust that's in there, that brass dust is actually taking up some of that slop. And like I say, if you completely clean it out, try and relubricate it, a lot of times, again, it'll skip. You'll get that, it just skips. It's like using too thin of an oil also. So just add a few drops of really light, like a household oil, a very light engine oil. Now, I use a UTF fluid. It's a really high tacky oil, so it's, you know, it's stringy, but it's a very lightweight oil. Like I say, a few drops there, and just sit here and just go like this several times. You'll get that oil worked in, and you'll take one of these things where you can barely turn this ring, and even this one's kind of hard to turn, and trust me, in no time at all, you'll have one that's just as free as this one. It really is just that easy. So there you go. Another SBE. I can't say it was brought back to life because it did work. It's just it's been recapped, an alignment, installed a hookup for the VFO, and basically the same thing to the VFO. Recapped it, a little bit of cleanup and maintenance, and it's ready to go. No, actually, it's not. Now that I think about it, I have to turn around here and grab it. I still have. Let me get this VFO slid over a little bit. I still have a matching SBE microphone to do for this customer. So I just need to, because this is a power mic. These came in two different versions, powered and non-powered, and of course this has the control in the back, the gain control, so this is a power mic. So yeah, I need to pop the amplifier board out of that. There's a couple electrolytic capacitors I need to change in there. But once I get that done, this will be ready to go. And so there you go. Another nice old sideband engineer's radio. I really like these radios. Just really good performers, really good reception. And I can't remember, honestly, if he had another one of these he was sending or not. He sends me so many SBEs. I can't, honestly, I just can't keep track of them all. I can't remember if he said he had another Console II. I think this is probably like the third, maybe fourth? I don't know. It's been quite a few, just to the Console IIs that I've done for him. But there you go.